Welcome back, everybody. This is the newest and latest, greatest episode of Worship Perspectives. Wanted to welcome everybody this week to a new guest. This is Josh. Josh is going to be joining us possibly a lot, maybe a little right now. We don't know. We're going to work it out, but we're going to try to get him involved as much as possible. We've got some upcoming news, too. We're also going to be looking at bringing back an old podcast that Josh and I used to work on and blend it into the fold. That is Worship Perspectives. It was So What's Your Take? So we're going to rebrand it. We're going to bring it in. We're going to be talking about different things. We've got the current episodes where we discuss different views of the musical side, the praise side of Worship Perspectives. We're going to be introducing the biblical side, the studying side or the reading side of Worship Perspectives. That'll be differing views on the gray areas of the Bible, denominational views. We're not really going to try to take sides in this, but we're going to try to present all the views and show the pitfalls and the ups and downs, just to lay out what you can and should avoid, what you can look for, things like that, but mainly just to present different perspectives. That's what this is all about. So we welcome him. We've got some other stuff coming down the pipes. We're not going to dig in too heavily on that. Today's episode, we're gonna talk about something that's a little bit of a touchy subject, so we're going to try to control it a little bit. We're going to talk about politics. And one of the core rules we set out when we started this was no politics. So let's just break it and throw it out the window. No, but in all seriousness, this episode is going to be driven very directionally in three different viewpoints. We're going to talk about internal church politics. We're going to be talking about external politics. We'll get into that and explain what we mean by that. And then we're going to be talking about politics and how they impact the church. The goal of this episode is not going to be to preach or push any political view. It's to talk about the pitfalls of it, how it can impact your worship experience, how it can impact your message experience in a church, how it can impact your daily experience with each other when you talk about fellowship and things like that. We all know we've all been there. So anyway, I'm going to kick this out to a wide-angle view. You can see we're all here. We're not going to be switching back and forth. We're going to try this view and see how people like it. So everybody say hey to the Brady Bunch. Hey! So you all know Rob. Josh, I just introduced. Jameson's not with us today. He may be out for a little bit, so we're going to let him do what he needs to do to take care of some things. And when he's ready, he's going to come back. So we hope you enjoy the show. So we're going to start out, and we're going to start with internal church politics. So what do we mean by internal? So internal politics would be your organizational structure within the church and how it can negatively impact things. An instance of this would be, and we're going to be very careful to tread here because there's good and bad, nepotism within a church. We're going to talk about political structure within a church when you talk about people giving and this influencing things in a church. Again, we're going to be very careful on that. And then we'll talk about the external politics of church, but let's start with the internal. So Josh, for those who don't know Josh comes from a theological background. He is currently at university, seminary, combination in transition to preach. So he brings a lot more of a theological side to this conversation. That's something we wanted because the rest of us were mainly the musical side, the praise and worship. So the first thing I would like to just toss to Josh specifically is, what do you think internal politics in the church are and how they can be positive and negative?
Yeah, so, when you're talking about, internal church politics or, church polity, how a church governs itself, how it, works in its internal structure, you mentioned nepotism, the good and the bad of, people giving and the influence that they, that can wield with, you giving X amount of dollars to a church for, whether you're hoping it goes towards like, a new building fund or you're wanting to help out a mission opportunity, either one of those things, being just very careful and not trying to extend the church and trying to make it where there's so many rules that it's difficult to really do anything. But I mean, you have to have some sort of governing structure so that everybody doesn't think that, they have all the power or the ability to do anything they want to do. You've got to have a central core idea and a core mission of where your church is going.
Gotcha, and that aligns with what I'm thinking too. So, in your opinion, what's too much?
Too much would be if, it takes, 6 to 8 months to try to decide to do simple things. Like, you don't want your church so over politicized that you're having to get so many people together to decide if, you need to buy more copy paper or not.
So let me be clear on something. My understanding of this, what you're talking about, while politics play into it, this trends more to bureaucracy to me.
Right.
They are related, I agree,
Yes.
but pulling it back into the pure political side of it, yes, we understand there are committees. We understand that there's a power struggle and that can lead to bureaucracy, but what is the negative you see to the actual committee structure versus just having no politics and everybody has a say and you've got the friendly view?
Well, I personally, I like the committee setup. I believe that with a committee setup, it gives you the ability to do things a little bit faster because you're not having to use the entire church body. The thing with the committee setup, though, is that, you have to make sure that the people on the committee are, active members of the church. They have their finger really on the pulse of the church into what the way that the church is moving. You want to have a church-wide, I hate to use this word, but you want to have a church-wide election or a selection process so that the church gets to decide who its representatives are. Now, the other side to that is doing a strict congregational style church politic, meaning that anytime you want to do anything, you have to have a church-wide business meeting.
Yeah, short of having explicit rules that are pre-approved.
Exactly. So if you want to, look at painting buildings, changing carpet colors, adding, if you're wanting to build a new stage, if you're wanting to hire somebody new, you have to use, in a congregational standpoint, the whole church has to get together, research on this person, hear from this person, and then vote in total. Now with a committee structure, if you use the committee structure, you're able to use and create like a personnel committee or a hiring committee. They get to do all the legwork for the church. They come to the church and give the proposal, and then the church as a whole still gets to vote on those big topic issues, whether it's bringing in a new pastor, doing some kind of major building remodeling, a purchase of a new building, purchase of land, anything like that. So there are good and bads to both, but it's really more or less figuring out where your church is at itself and what is going to work best for the people that are in that church.
Yeah, and I agree. You and I are in the same church, obviously, but we fall into the committee structure, and there's a debate on whether committees and teams, do you have a team, and then do you have a parent committee, but we're not getting into that. But from a political standpoint, there is value in looking at it that way. I have seen churches that use pure committees, and I've seen them that use them to the point where everything has to be committee driven.
Right.
I've seen churches that use committees with teams, which is I'm a big proponent of. So in other words, I'll give you an example that I'm very familiar with is the audiovisual committee makes decisions on future planning, spending, things like that. But the audiovisual team is the group of people who actually come in and do worship services. They don't necessarily have to be the same group of people. They can do that. So there's a blend, but not all churches fall to that. Some do the committee as a whole, and that's their everything. But where you run into a problem is, like you said, are you paralyzed because your committee can't come to a decision? Or worse, God forbid, your congregation now feels animosity toward the committee because they're like, well, we elected you, you need to do what we want to do. And in reality, if you put somebody on an audiovisual team or on a personnel team, it's because they're good at that. Right. They understand it, and you're trusting that they will have the best interest of the church, and you have to pull that emotion away. But I'll throw it over to Rob for a second. Rob, you recently come from a different perspective, a different church, a smaller, more rural, and I've been in that as well. So what's your take on this particular thing, committees and politics?
The church that I come from, what they do is that we have the men's meeting. And the men's meeting is all the men in the church. Once a quarter, we'll sit down and they'll have a meeting. If there's something special that needs to be looked at, they'll do another men's meeting. They used to do it once a month. And the only issue that caused with was like Josh was saying, it takes forever to get anything done. But that when the decisions are made and what gets done is finally done, everybody's going to be happy with it because everybody had their input on it.
You assume.
You would assume. And I've seen it work that way, and it works out great. What that church does is, if anything's under a set amount, like under $2,000, one person is able to approve it.
Right.
If it's over $2,000, it needs to be brought to the men of the church. And if it's something that significantly impacts the church, then the men of the church meet on it, present it to the entire church, and the entire church takes a vote on it. So there are ways to do it without committees. Now, this church also has a committee. Like when the pastor retired, I mean, we went for years without having an on-staff pastor, and some of the men of the church just got up and started preaching, and it really brought everybody out of their shell, and it made everybody grow, and it was a great thing. But they had the pastoral search committee who was in charge of finding the candidates. So, something major like that, they would still set up committees for. And I'm not going to say I'm between two churches right now. I'm still a part of that church, but I'm also a part of Matt's church now for
we got him, you can't have him back.
I still go there for evening services, and I still want to be a part of the team because there's a lot of my friends there. But being where I'm at now is showing me like a whole different side to all of these. So I'm basically, I just jumped out of the frying pan and into a completely different fire, and I'm enjoying it, and it's very challenging to me. So this is something that, great news. I'm a part of a new team now, and it's not a new team. I've been with this team for years now, but now I'm much more a part of that team, and it's been a humbling experience. But now I've got to learn a whole new way of doing everything. So I'm kind of soaking in all this information here. I'm not necessarily here like as a subject matter expert. I'm more here learning. So my perspective on it is a little bit different. I absolutely believe that committees save lives. I also believe that there is something to be said for getting the whole church in on some decisions.
I agree.
It's a valid point, and to be fair, it's kind of like when you discuss a budgeting tool.
Right.
A budgeting tool only is wrong or right if it's wrong or right for you. It's a tool.
Yeah.
Committees are a tool. It's a way of accomplishing things. It may be right for a church and it's wrong for another church. But what you said actually brings another point that's kind of related, and I just hit on it real fast. See if y'all have any objections or thoughts or whatever. But I did this as well. I actually left for a little while and went to another church as well, and I believe God put me in that position to meet my wife and to learn some other things. I'm a firm believer that people should have the ability to go and visit other churches, to do other things. There's a lot of churches that would feel bad about that. They're like, well, you're plugged in here, you need to be here. But sometimes seeing how other churches do things and experiencing the good and the bad really opens your eyes to your own church and your own family too. I mean, let's be honest, this goes beyond the church. Like, man, I used to think this was a big deal, and then I went to this other place, and that ain't a big deal at all, So I like that viewpoint. I went to another denomination, actually, or I guess it would be a denomination. And that denomination, I'll just say it right, it was Assemblies of God, and there's a lot of things I love about that, and there was a couple of things I was, But the bottom line is I got to see people behaving and acting differently. I got to see people worshiping differently. I got to see people diving in differently. And then when you come back to what you know or what you thought you knew, you realize, okay, committees may not be that big of a deal, because I saw the downs of another type of way of doing it, which is a council, and we won't get into that. But all of this has political ramifications, and that is, if you set up any of these methods and anybody gets in a position to where they feel like they either A, need to do something themselves because the bureaucracy is too great, or B, but they get too comfortable in spending money without asking permission, it opens the door for abuse.
Right.
Now, Josh, I'm going to throw it back to you because I want your specific viewpoint before we translate into external politics. You have had a recent experience into the backside of church politics and the backside of denominational politics. You can go into it as little or as much, but Josh had a chance to work within a leader of a major denomination in their staff and got to see the back workings of it. So I'm curious your opinion. You spoke to how it works within a church, but how does that translate to the church within a denomination?
Right.
Does it get worse, better? Does it depend on how it's set up?
Right. I mean, it's kind of like how local churches work when it comes to a denomination. got to see what works, because you've got so many moving parts in a large denomination like that the committee structure is really the only thing that really works in a large denomination like that, because you can't have all of those members involved in the denominational politics of making those decisions, because it would just take too long to have that much opinion into those issues.
Yeah.
And so those committees act as the ability to give voice to the other people in that denomination that are not on those committees. And, those members on those committees are selected by another committee that's voted on, at large by the whole denomination.
So it's like a personnel or a committee.
It's like a committee on committees, and then after that committee doles out the assignments of different people from a nominations committee.
So if I understand what you're describing, it sounds to me like what you're describing in the Baptist, Southern Baptist denomination kind of closely resembles the constitutional republic of the government. It's very similar design, and I don't mean to pull that in 100% yet, but we're going to get to that. But there's value in seeing that works.
Right,
It works
exactly.
in small, it works in big.
Right.
Is it better than something else? Well, when you look at some of the other denominations out there, we're not going to pick and choose, but
Right.
the Methodists, what they're going through right now, you can see how doing it different ways can have hugely
Exactly.
negative or hugely positive.
Right.
So it's an interesting way to see, and like I would love to hear a Catholic perspective on this as well, because theirs is very, triangular up to the top.
Yeah, exactly.
See how theirs works in this
Right.
type of scenario. But that's an interesting perspective. But I want to use that to kind of segue into another topic, which we're going to talk about external politics. Not quite yet like governmental politics. That's a different issue, and that's going to be a pretty quick one. But the external politics is, and how do I put this without, we're trying not to step on toes. In this case, I don't think we have a choice. Let's just call it what it is today, which is wokeism, whatever you want to call it, infiltrating into the church. Now, my problem comes in that wokeism, if that's a word, this has always tried to push into the church. It just seems to be more visible today. Part of that may be social media. Part of that may be just media in general. But the reality is, back in the 60s, the free love movement, that tried to generationally push into the church. But what we're talking about today, let's just call it what it is, the Methodist movement with the LGBTQT. I'm not pushing anything that is, what's the word they use? Tolerance. We're not talking about tolerance. We're not going to get into that. But the point is, the Methodist Church as an organization tried to push woke ideology down through its ranks, and that's where the politicization of the church becomes a pitfall.
Right.
Because it's like, hey, we have to accept this. We're gonna give you a chance to vote in and out. Well, to me, that's a core fundamental thing, and they're basically saying we're going to change our core fundamental beliefs. If you like it, great, stay with us. If you don't, man, tough, get out.
Yeah.
So that's where I throw it to y'all for just a general question. How do y'all feel about, and we won't say wokeism specifically, but how do y'all feel about external politics infiltrating a denomination or a church?
I'd really like to take this one first, and the reason being is that in preparation for this, I looked at some scriptures, and the ones that really stood up. And the first scripture that I'm going to quote is going to tell you exactly why, Matt. First is 1 Corinthians 11:1. Be imitators of me as I am of Christ, which was Paul's example to the church of Corinth. We're not supposed to be trying to be like the world. We're supposed to be trying to be like Jesus. So if the people that we put in charge are trying to be like Jesus and not trying to be like the rest of the world, I think a lot of these problems will kind of solve themselves. Now, that's not to say we're not still going to have to deal with issues of things that are unbiblical finding its way into our churches, because that's certainly a battle that all churches fight, is keeping the devil at bay. But luckily we have a Lord and a Savior who's far more powerful than any of that. The second one that I'm going to bring up is 1 Corinthians 9:19 through 23, which says, for though I'm free from all, I've made myself a servant to all, that I might win more of them. To the Jews I became as a Jew in order to win Jews. To those under the law I became as one under the law, though not myself being under the law, that I might win those under the law. To those outside of the law, not being outside of the law of God, but under the law of Christ, that I might win those outside of the law. To the weak I became weak, that I might win the weak. I have become all things to all people, that by all means I might save some. So what that is saying is that we need to reach the world where the world is at. But that, at the same time, we can't become corrupted by that. Otherwise, we lose our testimony, and we lose not necessarily our salvation, but our credibility. Yes, thank you, Josh. So really, it's a tricky balancing act to where you've got to meet the world where the world is, but you also can't become conformed by the world. We're conformed to Christ, not to the world. So we have to maintain that separation and maintain the things that are acceptable to God as being our first thought. We have to look. We have to, in any situation where we have a decision to make, we have to think, okay, well, how is Jesus an example of how this decision will play out? How is Jesus' life and ministry an example? That's something, Matt, you were talking about just a few episodes. In everything that we do, we got to look, how would Jesus deal with this situation? How is Jesus' life a testimony to how we're making our decisions?
If you break out WWJD.
I wasn't going to do it, I promise.
What do you think, Josh?
It's definitely a balancing act. I go back to the old, the best way to describe it would be, it is a lot easier to pull somebody off of the chair than it is to pull somebody up onto the chair.
Yeah.
And as Christians and as believers, we are trying to pull people and win people to Christ. And, we do have to meet them where they're at, but we have to be extremely careful not to allow their circumstances and what they're involved in to grab us and to pull us into what they're doing. And so that's where it comes back to, being, committed into a local church and having a, support system that allows you to go out and do that work, but without being corrupted by the ideology and the ways of the people that are, that you're trying to reach. The pitfall of that is that churches sometimes try to be so open and inclusive to people of the world that before they realize that they've allowed the things that they've been trying to save people from to become the bullhorn of what they're now promoting.
Which I think that's a side effect of the world, but yeah, right. It's a valid point.
It's the problem of if you allow worldly things to begin to dictate where your church is going, then you lose the banner of Christ because that's no longer the center point. Of your
this
church.
is going to sound really dumb, but the series Walking Dead comes to mind when you talk about this. Like when a zombie apocalypse first breaks out, we want to lead one in, let one come in the door, and then you're like, okay, maybe we can figure it out. Maybe, and then all of a sudden two come in, and then all of a sudden you've got a room full of zombies, and you forget what you got to do. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
The world will step on you, and will come in and just run you out. And there was a wise man once said, come as you are, but leave your politics at the door.
Yeah.
We don't want to exclude them from what we're doing. We just don't want people to come in and be like, okay, if you're in the LGBTQ, if you're a Muslim, and you disagree with Christian beliefs, we want you to come to our church. We want you to experience what we believe we have to offer for the world. But we also want you to leave your politics at the door the same way I would be expected to leave mine if I went into your world. I would be expected to leave my Christian bigot beliefs, like a lot of people call it. It's not to me. But if I walked into an LGBTQ bar, they would not expect me to come in there Bible thumping and throwing Bibles without causing strife and doing that. So to your point, yes, we have to be in the world. We have to do that. We have to accept people as they are. But we definitely don't have to allow them to be put in positions of authority to dictate our beliefs.
Yeah, correct.
So this is where we have to be careful not to step on toes. We're not trying to exclude anybody. We're not trying to be inclusive. We're not trying to be tolerant. We're just saying everything has consequences. There are pitfalls to different political beliefs and letting it infiltrate what you are. Which this segues into the final topic, which is the one that's a lot easier to talk about, but it has a lot more rabbit trails, is politics. So now we're not talking about internal politics of a church, the political structure, the nepotism, the people gaining too much power, that kind of stuff. We're not talking about bringing the wokeism into the church and having it infiltrate your core beliefs. What we're talking about is just talking about Obamonomics, Bidenomics, Trumpisms, Make America Great, bringing that into the church in its raw form.
Yeah.
And I personally believe that this started somewhere in the neighborhood of the Bill Clinton administration. But
I think it goes back a little bit further than that.
I think fundamentally it does, but I think that's when it became very visible.
Right.
It was very, very visible. And the idea in this is, okay, there are Democrats in the church, there are Republicans in the church, there are independents in the church. There are conservative views that align with religion A. There are liberal views that align with religion B. We're not getting into the works of that. What I want is y'all's thoughts on when is it okay to bring politics into a conversation that could potentially make or break your ability to witness to someone? Because sometimes you have to talk politics just to get into somebody's wheelhouse.
Oh, exactly. Yeah.
Josh, I'll start with you on this one.
Politics nowadays is just so divisive and mean-spirited
that
everybody wants to stay away from it, but at the same time, everybody wants to discuss it because in one way or the other, politics affects all of us to some degree, more or less.
Yeah.
And, we have to be, as believers, we have to understand that we're called, Paul talks about it all throughout his writings. We're called to a higher purpose, but he also talks about, specifically in Romans, he talks about, how do we, in his time, how do we submit, how do we not submit to the Roman Empire?
Yeah.
And his thing of, you're to submit to your civil authorities unless they call you to do something outside of God's will.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, for Christians, God's will and God's word is our highest power. It's our highest pledge that we should give to. It's our highest authority. We shouldn't put, the U.S. flag, whatever national flag that you've got, governing documents, none of that should go above the Word of God and what He's called us to do. And so you have to walk that line of when politicians or groups try to do things that are outside of God's will. Or examples, the Obergefell decision in 2015 with the legalization of same-sex marriage. Christians are celebrating the overturning of Roe v. Wade. Things like that where we're getting involved because it deals corely with our beliefs of what we believe on certain issues as believers. There are other things that
they're not
spiritually relevant that Christians are still to have opinions on, but that might not be the direction you need to go in a political conversation. If you're having a salvific conversation with someone and it devolves into politics and you're arguing over, taxes.
Yeah, I agree.
Is that really,
But here's where the rubber meets the road, and I agree with what you're saying. The problem lies in that political conversations and decisions have direct impact on our day-to-day lives of our kids, our spouses, our family.
Yeah.
And what happens is that is tied to your emotional heartstrings.
Right.
Yes, it doesn't affect your salvation, but it affects your lifestyle, so you start getting pulled into something you shouldn't.
And I think with that right there, when it comes to, like, for example, let's say that me and you disagree on the political spectrum on a number of issues, but we're both biblically minded, biblically grounded believers in Christ.
Yeah.
That should be what unites us to say, we can have these conversations off to the side where we're not going to agree on tax brackets or, the newest defense, whatever is being pushed through Congress. We might not agree on that, but our like-mindedness when it comes to things of Christ and things biblically, that is what unites us. And we can still have these conversations off to the side, but we can't let that bleed into our ability to unite for the will of God.
Yeah, I agree with that. Rob,
100% agree with it. And the biggest thing, and it's something that I've been thinking about for a while, and I see this, and I'll admit, I spend entirely too much time on social media. Mainly because I like to take a lot of this and I'll go check out the worship leader groups, and I'll go check out these other Christian groups here, and I'm looking for ideas for how to do our next videos. That's what I spend most of my time on social media doing. But I kept seeing this one thing that popped up that said, if you listen to people who say, well, Jesus sat down and ate with sinners, and you think that your idea for that is to go sit down and eat with sinners, you're confused about who you are in that story. And that, especially when you're dealing with politics, I mean, we're not commanded to be political creatures. That's not anywhere in the Bible that I've certainly found. It does say that it does basically state in a roundabout kind of way that when we're dealing with politics and things like that, that we're supposed to vote our conscience and we're supposed to be an influence on it, but we're not necessarily supposed to be political activists. That's not what we're here for. That can damage our ability to reach other, people that wouldn't become believers otherwise. We're supposed to be a representative of Christ, not a representative of any necessarily political party. That's not to say that we're forbidden to be involved with politics. It's just, it's not commanded that we're political. So I think I tend to be a little bit political just because I spent 12 years in the military and I have, certain views on certain things based on what I've seen in the world. And I've been deployed in combat, 2 separate wars. And the things that I saw really made it, and it actually pulled me away from God because I got so wrapped up in the politics of it. And I was in rebellion back then, but it pulled me further and further away from God. And it wasn't until I came back after leaving the military, when I came back home, got involved in church and actually met Jesus for who he is and realized I had it so wrong this whole time, but I spent so much time focusing on the political stuff that I wasn't paying attention to who I'm supposed to be. And I think that that's a trap that's very, very dangerous for people to fall into, is if you get too wrapped up into what's going on politically in the world, you'll lose track of where you're supposed to be focusing. And one of the things that you've got to protect at all costs is your testimony, your credibility, your testimony. If you're going to be able to witness to somebody, you have to be able to come to that person from a place of humility. You're going to have to come to that person without, seeming like you're trying to push an agenda on them, because all that's going to do is it's going to make your testimony worthless because they're not going to want to listen to it.
Yeah, what you bring to the table has to be better than what they have currently.
Yes, exactly.
And you can't do it in your own skin. You
Right,
have to do it with God.
Yeah.
And I'll even bring up a point. This is not mine. I'm just regurgitating something that I've discussed in the past. I use the streets of New Orleans, Louisiana, as a good example of this. In the Bible, Christ met the woman at the well and talked about her being divorced and being with other women. Christ didn't go to her house and walk in on her doing it and confront her. Christ didn't go into the dens where the tax collectors did. He lived his life, and when they crossed his path, he showed them better things, the things of God, not of the world. So my point is, if Jesus were alive today on the streets that we live on, not, heavenly, you wouldn't see Jesus walking into strip clubs in New Orleans, Louisiana, trying to witness to them. He would be walking the streets, and if they crossed into his path, he would show them something better than what they have. This is where a lot of people get confused. It's like, well, we need to go where they are. No, that's not what it meant. It means you're in the world. You need to show them better things.
Yeah, exactly.
But
You have to meet them in the world without being a part of that world.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But it's very easy sometimes when you go and try to connect with someone on their level and say, well, I struggle with that too, and we can talk about this, and then all of a sudden you're in the same world they are, and in reality, you're supposed to be pulling them toward the world you're in, not going the other way.
Right.
We've all struggled with something like that. But that's the third perspective on this, which is the politics above internal and external politics. I think the last thing to kind of wrap the conversation up is to talk about, I want to clear one thought up though before we go there, and I want to talk about the nepotism thing. We didn't really delve into that a little bit. I want to make sure people understand that are watching this that might get offended at this. We're not trying to offend anyone. We're not saying you can't have people in your family work in a church. Church is family by very definition. People work in church that are related. What we're talking about is when nepotism creeps in and it creates a political push, or things get done that wouldn't normally get done because someone is related to someone else. Right. So this is not a shot at anybody who's got somebody's a pastor and then he hires his kids to do the youth ministry and things like that. This is more geared at the, well, we can't make any changes because he's just going to say no because it's his kids.
Right.
When it becomes a problem. So I just want to clear that up because I know someone somewhere, a commenter, is going to say something like, so you're saying you can't have somebody working at, no, it's not that.
No, yeah. That's a good thing to clear up.
Like, I'll give you a perfect example of that is I know somebody who I have regular conversations with who goes to a church where the pastor's son is like, they would not hire, they've hired an assistant pastor, but he came into that church thinking that he was going to become their pastor eventually. Well, the problem is that he's only ever going to be an assistant pastor because the only person that will ever take that pulpit from that pastor is his son. That's the nepotism, the kind of nepotism that Matt's talking about. When every decision you make has to do with how is it going to affect your immediate family as a position in the leader, or as a leader in the church, that's not a position you ever want to find yourself in. That's exactly what Matt and Josh are warning about.
Yeah.
The other part of that is off of the nepotism conversation is the political side of it. I have seen instances in the past where individuals, or I've heard stories from people. I don't think I've witnessed it ever in the church that I go to, but I mean, it always happens at some level. Someone donates a lot of money to the church, so there's an assumption that person has a lot of pull, a lot of sway in the church. That's very minimal, but it's still politics. It still plays into this negative thing of, well, we can't make good decisions because so-and-so doesn't like it, so we have to do hymns, we can't do contemporary songs.
Right.
So it's just a pitfall you need to watch out for when you go into some denominations, some churches, and I have to, biblically it's there, and it had to have existed a lot more rampantly in Jesus' time than people realize. You had the priests, and you had the Pharisees, and you had these people that were very prominent, and they had a lot of money, and they probably had a lot of money because they did things wrong. That's the way it worked. And because of that, when you go into church, all your mind sees is, this is church. This is just power people doing power things. And this is what we want to just caution against is, there's a lot of different ways of doing things. There's good, there's bad, there's a lot of perspectives, but at the end of the day, everything you do has pros, it has cons, and it has consequences. So just go into everything with an open mind and look at it.
And just keep Jesus as your guiding light for all the decisions you make, and remember that that's who you were called to imitate is Christ. We're called to be imitations of Christ, not imitations of the world, and fall into those little traps, and just be careful to guard your testimony, and that's all the advice I really have to give on that.
Yeah.
So Josh, one last question for you, and that is, given your theological background, where do we go from here, knowing that the pitfalls are there, they're here, the wokeism is here? Where do we go?
I mean, I think as, believers, we do have to actively engage in bad theology. We have to actively fight against bad ideologies that are hurtful and damaging to the church. But it's the way that we go about it is where sometimes the pitfalls come from.
Yeah.
If we go about it in a hateful and angry way, we're going to turn those people off from the love of Christ. But as you guys have alluded to, we come to that eventual conversation about that ideology. We come to it in the way that Christ handled things, in a loving, humble way. We come to situations like that humbly.
Yeah.
We're more likely to get a proper response. Now, not always. You're going to have people that you engage with that are just going to be angry that you're not affirming what they're doing.
Yeah.
And they're going to spout that anger at you. And your reaction will be important in how not only you're portrayed, but how your faith is portrayed.
Yeah.
And so if you respond just as harshly in kind, it not only makes you look bad, but it also makes the Lord look bad. Because we're to be imitators of Christ. We're to have His likeness on us as believers, and if we act un-Christ-like, then we're putting ourselves in that same situation while we're still claiming to fight against it.
Yeah.
But one of the biggest things that believers are going to have to do is, one thing is, believers need to be biblically educated on what they're to believe.
Yeah.
Because there's such a biblical illiteracy right now you can say something that sounds halfway theological, and people are going to try and put it in the Bible. People are going to try and say, that's in there somewhere when it's not, or you're going to have biblical passages taken out of context.
Yeah.
And so, biblical knowledge and understanding what the Bible says about these issues, to me, is one of the key things that the church has to do better at if we're going to properly defend and promote our faith.
Yeah, and I'll wrap it up as we start winding down. But I think the fundamental takeaway that I'm getting from this is, from a political perspective, there's so much out there that's infiltrating the church.
I mean,
People are really getting bent out of shape over everything, but the reality is Christ himself said, you will be persecuted as I have been persecuted.
Exactly. Yeah.
I think the biggest disconnect and the takeaway is that people don't truly fear that they're going to be persecuted here.
Yeah.
There are parts of the world where it's obvious.
Right.
I mean, China, I haven't been to China, but I know what's coming out of there from a media's perspective, and I can tell you people are being persecuted there.
Yeah.
My problem is for people to say you have to believe the way I do because that's the way our country was founded, or you have to believe the way I do because that's the way God intended it. The reality is, if Christ got persecuted and beat up and ultimately killed on a cross, it's not going to get better for us than it was for him.
Exactly. Yeah.
So when you have that fear and that reality in your mind, it makes you approach it differently when you have these conversations of, I don't have to necessarily convert you. I need to just tell you what Christ has done for me, and whether you're converted is the Spirit's job.
Yeah.
And that's where I think I see the disconnect is. I want to go out there and tell people you can't believe that way, you can't live that lifestyle and survive. And the truth is you can't.
No, exactly.
But it's not my place to convince you of that. It's the Spirit's. It's my place to show you that something is better than what you have.
Exactly.
And if I'm not doing that, I'm not doing what God called me to do.
Exactly.
I agree with you 100%.
Well, guys, y'all got any other thoughts before we wrap this down?
No.
Well, I appreciate it. Join us again on our next episode. We're going to try to keep the cadence going. We're going to try to do some more touchy subjects. We're going to try to dig in. Ultimately, we want to show the love of Christ. We want to keep the pokes to a minimum, but the entire point of what we're doing is to open your mind to different perspectives. We hope we get to even expand that into people who might not even believe the way we do fundamentally. But I'm going to leave that in God's hands, because I'm not going to just go out there and grab somebody and say, hey, you're Muslim, come talk to us about, But if God puts it in our plate, we're going to open it and show different perspectives and hope you learn from it. But anyway, we hope you have a blessed week. Join us again as we bring the next episode, and God bless everybody.